Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Fast Keto. I have a super fun episode for you today. It is all about the top 10 mistakes that I see people make the most often on keto, and I know all about them because I have made all of them. So I did a special episode YouTube video about this, and today I am talking about all of those top 10 mistakes, plus a super fun interview with Hanna, Boethius, and Bitte from the Low Carb Universe. And we're talking about the biggest mistakes that they've made doing low carb and keto, and they should know they've been in the space for a very long time. Bitte has been doing low carb for over 10 years and just had her 10-year anniversary doing low carb. So we talk about some of the biggest mistakes that they've made and that they see other people make doing low carb and keto. So today's theme is all about avoiding keto mistakes so that you can get the best results following a low carb and keto diet. I want to make a special announcement as today, for the very first time, Hanna and Bitte are doing a flash sale, a 1-day only sale for keto ladies. It's coming up in several weeks in Mallorca. This is one of the best events. I look forward to it all year long. I went to it last year and it was one of the most amazing events that I've ever been to. I made so many new friends. You're in a beautiful spa hotel in Spain. It is an incredible spa weekend to treat yourself, learning all about keto and low carb from expert speakers, spending time in the massage room, doing yoga, going to the beach, and enjoying a nonstop low carb and keto buffet of the most amazing food. Seriously, I mostly just go for the food. It is that incredible. I had such an amazing time last year. I came back with more friends in just one weekend than I had made probably in the whole of last year. And it's just an incredible experience. So they're doing a very special 1-day only flash sale, and I'm going to put the link to it in the show notes. It's also going to be on my Instagram page, on their Instagram page, on their Facebook, on all the social media feeds. So you can grab the link, and it is a huge sale. I think they're doing 25% off room and board, basically the tickets for the whole event. And they never do any kind of sales like this. So it's really an awesome opportunity to take advantage of. So look out for that today, Friday, February 1st. Look out for the flash sale for keto ladies. And without any further ado, here is today's episode. Hey guys, so I want to talk to you today about the 10 biggest mistakes that I see people making all the time on keto. Now, I've been doing keto for over 5 years, since 2014, and I got to make all the mistakes so that you don't have to, because I learned so much from all of the mistakes that I made trying things out, trying to figure keto out way before there were all these incredible resources that are out there now, like so many keto books, podcasts, YouTube channels, and videos. There really wasn't that much out there when I first started. So I basically had to go and do a lot of trial and error. Since then, I've written my book, Keto Essentials. I have gone back to school to study biochemistry with a medical perspective. I have released several programs, my 28-day challenge, my original challenge, and the brand new Phase 2 meal plans that I have out now, which are higher protein. I've developed all these programs and resources. And in that time, I've just really learned so much from making mistakes. And I want to share some of the top mistakes that I've made so that you can avoid making them. Now, mistake number 1, treating fat as a free food. Now, there really is no such thing as a free food. I know that when I started keto, I was really learning about the endocrine theory of weight loss, and especially the way that fat and different macronutrients, fat, protein, and carb, affect our hormones, and especially the hormone insulin. And I learned that fat actually stimulates insulin the least. So I started to think, well, keto is a healthy, high-fat diet, and it doesn't stimulate insulin a lot to eat fat. So that means I can eat as much fat as I want, right? I made a huge mistake doing that because I didn't realize that you can't just throw the whole calories in, calories out thing out the window. And it really is important to still make sure that you're accountable, not just to macro percentages, but also to how much you're eating. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not recognizing that fat really is super energy dense. So you probably know that fat has 9 calories per gram versus the 4 calories per gram that are in carbohydrates and protein, but there's also no real thermic effect of food. The thermic effect of food is when you eat a food and it takes quite a bit of energy and ATP in order to break it down and assimilate it. Now, ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and it is what we use to power all the cellular mechanisms and processes that happen in our metabolic function in the body. And when we break down protein, we actually use a ton of energy to do that. And for that reason, there's a 30% thermic effect with protein. So if you eat about 400 calories of protein, you're actually only eating about 2/3 of that when it comes down to the calories. With fat, that isn't the case. So you're getting the full value of those 9 grams of energy per gram of fat, those 9 calories of energy, I should say, per gram of fat. So you really can't treat fat as a free food, and I really made that mistake at the beginning. Now, mistake number 2 that I see all the time is counting net carbs instead of total carbs. And people ask me this question all the time. Do I need to count the carbs in green vegetables? Do I need to count the carbs in this food? All carbs need to be counted because all carbs count. So I don't really like the whole net carb thing. The purpose of if you haven't heard of this concept, basically you take the total amount of carb that you ate and you minus and subtract the fiber from it. And a lot of this was presented by Michael Eades. I'm a huge fan of his work and his book, Protein Power, but I believe that's where this originally came from. And the problem is that you really can't go by net carbs because all carbs count. And it's important to make sure that if you want to get into a state of ketosis, ketogenesis only really occurs, and they've seen this in multiple studies, when you get to around 20 grams of total carb per day, not net carbs per day. So that's why we want to make sure to always count total carbs and not net carbs. Now, mistake number 3 is overdoing keto foods. So we talk a lot about foods that are keto, and that means that they're foods that are really friendly for a keto diet. So they're high in healthy fats, usually they're really low in carb, they've got great nutrient density, and these keto foods, we also tend to think of them as kind of free foods and free-for-alls and things. We don't really remember that we have to still take into account the calories in them. We have to take into account the fact that they're full of energy. And some of these foods that a lot of people overdo, and I know I did, are all the creams, all the heavy whipping cream, the cream cheeses, all the nuts, especially the nut butters. My biggest one was coconut butter. I could live off of coconut butter for the rest of my life. If you sent me to a desert island, that would be the food that I request. I absolutely love it. But you have to remember that all these creams and nut butters and coconut oil are super energy dense. So if your goal doing keto is to get into ketosis, but also burn fat and increase and enhance your body composition. So by that, I mean lower your fat percentage. And by doing that, raising your muscle mass and bone density percentage, and also improving your metabolic health by doing that. If that's your goal, then you really don't want to go super crazy on all those keto foods. And even having like 1 or 2 or 3 avocados in a day, just because it's a keto food doesn't mean that you can just have as much of it as you want and get to your goals. Now, if your goal is just to get into ketosis for weight maintenance or weight gain, that's a totally different story. But most people that I interact with, I'd say over 90% are doing keto primarily for enhancing body composition. And by that, I mean reducing fat. So that's really one of the top mistakes that I see. Mistake number 4 is overdoing the sweeteners. Now, when I first got into keto, sweeteners were such a helpful thing for me because I honestly don't think that I would have tried keto if I didn't know that there was a replacement for sugar, because I was such a sugar and carb addict. And I really was a food addict. And I was a food addict of all the foods that had all the sugar and all the carbs in them. So I really needed to have this like soft landing and have something to help me make the transition. Erythritol, stevia, all of these things really helped me make that transition. And that's why I have a lot of recipes in my cookbook and in my meal plans that have these things in them, because it's really important to have a replacement. Now, over time, you start to change the way that you look at food. You change your relationship with food through keto, and you also develop a more and more savory palate. So about 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years this spring, I guess a year and a half really, but I gave up sweeteners altogether, and all foods now taste sweet to me. Now, one of the reasons that people can overdo sweeteners, and the reason I say this is because having a lot of sweeteners in the diet, it can make it so that you actually don't get rid of cravings. And I know that for me, one of the main drivers and reasons that I do keto is so that I can be free of dependence on food. When you become a fat-fueled, ketogenically, apt or ketogenically adapted person, you also gain food independence, fuel independence, and energy independence. And you are able to fuel yourself from your stored surplus energy that your body stored so thoughtfully for you for a time that you might not have access to external sources of energy. We call that body fat. Now, it's great to be fat-fueled because when you are fat-fueled instead of sugar-fueled, you don't have to depend on eating food every couple of hours. When you are sugar-fueled, you need to have this constant energy coming in all the time, and you're eating 2 to 3 hours, 5 to 6 meals a day maybe. And one of the things that I love about it is you also have this freedom from cravings because you're really prioritizing the most nutrient-dense foods. And because of that, we often also lose cravings. And I found that for me, eliminating sweeteners, it really helped me eliminate all cravings altogether. But it also helped me fixate on food less. It helped me heal my relationship with food. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with having some sweeteners, but focus on the natural sweetness that comes in so many foods. I do a lot of 100% dark chocolate. I think anything above 90 is excellent for keto, but you notice that everything really starts to taste sweet. You can taste the milk sugars in dairy and cheeses. You can taste the natural sweetness that comes in vegetables, and you can taste the sweetness in heavy whipping cream. You can taste the natural sweetness that is abundant in so many foods. When you go off of sugar, your palate, it sort of calibrates itself, your taste buds recalibrate. And so overdoing natural sweeteners, I think, can be problematic in some people. Use it at first, but over time, it's great to try and reduce it slowly. Try to make sweetener-free desserts. I have been making more and more of those and more recipes for those because more and more people are asking me for them. So that's mistake number 4. Hey guys, just taking a really quick break to talk about the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. If you're interested in doing a ketogenic diet for yourself, it's a great place to start. I teach you everything about how to follow a keto diet to get yourself into nutritional ketosis, and it includes 28 days of meal plans. It comes with weekly shopping lists, how to interpret results, how to test yourself, a complete guide to getting started on keto. If you've been keto for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want to in terms of your health or fat loss, or you are brand new to keto, the 28-day challenge is a great option because it also comes with my free coaching and support in our members Facebook group, and you can post any questions that you have about the meal plans, about keto, and I am there supporting you. We have an amazing community in our group because everybody in there is so excited about following keto, about having found something that really works well for them. And everyone in there is just so kind, caring, generous, and supportive. And it's a really fun place to be and hang out. So if you like more info on it, you can find it at ketogenicgirl.com. And it's the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And now back to our interview. Number 5 is not having an eating window, a daily eating window every day. Now, I think it's really important to have an eating window, and it doesn't have to be huge, but even just doing a 16-8, it really makes a huge difference because you want to be able to shift in and out of the absorptive state and the post-absorptive state. So I talk about this quite a bit, but we get into ketogenesis and ketosis when we are able to access the post-absorptive state. And that only happens if you have a period of time when you're not eating food. That's why a lot of people never get into ketosis and never burn any body fat on any kind of diet. They're really just burning through stores of water and other things. You really don't burn fat really efficiently unless you are able to access the post-absorptive state, because the dominant fuel in that state is fatty acids. That's when you're mobilizing your stored body fat for energy. And you can only do that if you are going for periods of time where you're not eating. So if you have a meal every 3 to 4 hours or less than that, then you're only really getting into the post-absorptive state between a really small window at night, say between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., and that's really not a lot of time. If you have an eating window every day and you do an 8, sort of 16 intermittent fasting, then you have all this time, say 4 or 5 hours between having dinner and going to bed when you are not eating. Or if you have your breakfast a little bit later in the day, say at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., or noon, and break your fast with your first meal being later in the day, then you have all this time where your body's in that post-absorptive state and your dominant fuel in that state is fatty acids. You're burning your stored body fat. Now, mistake number 6 that I see all the time is not supplementing with electrolytes and sodium, especially. We need sodium when we are on a ketogenic or low carb diet because we normally get so much sodium from packaged foods, from fast foods, from so many of the convenient foods that we all rely on so much. And your body needs sodium. It's one of the most important things in the body. It is part of every single cell. We have sodium potassium pumps on the cellular membranes that enable glucose and fluids and all these different nutrients to pass in and out of our cells. And we need sodium and potassium in order to do that. So we also need sodium in order to make sure that conductivity is happening in our body. That's why it's called electrolytes. And it's also important for our daily elimination. Our bowels need sodium. So it's really great to add 1 to 2 teaspoons of sodium salt per day. Add it to your food. And then if you don't add it to your food, I like to take it also preventatively. In the morning, I wake up and have a glass of water with half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of salt, just to make sure that I'm firing on all cylinders during the day. And it's really important to supplement with those electrolytes. And you can also take magnesium, calcium. All of these things are part of the transporter and active transport mechanisms in our body. So it's really important to do that. Mistake number 7 is not getting enough protein. It's really important to prioritize protein. Protein is functional material. It's not energy or fuel. It's not like fat or carbohydrates. So we really need to make sure that we get adequate protein. I know when I started keto, I really focused on getting so many fats and really restricting my protein a lot. And it wasn't until I made the switch and increased my protein and bumped it up, moderated my fat a little bit more. Once you are keto adapted, you are able to access your stored body fat, so you don't have to rely on getting all this fat that you need to at first when you switch to keto. And you're able to then just fuel yourself off that stored body energy, but you really need to prioritize protein in order to make sure you get all your essential amino acids. And it's really, really important if you want to feel good, especially if you're an active person and you do any kind of workouts or regimens. It's really important to prioritize protein. You're going to feel so much better. Now, mistake number 8 is not eating the right kinds of fats. We want to focus on food quality and getting the right kinds of fats. And you can get fats from so many different sources. And there's better ones, better quality ones, lower quality ones. And eventually, it's really great if you can move towards getting your fats, especially the ones that contain our essential fatty acids, our essential omega-3 fatty acids from salmon. There are so many great fats out there, avocado oil, walnut oil. There's so many out there that you can use, coconut oil as well. You know, getting fats from sardines is one of the best ways. Oily fatty fish have the best fats. They are so nutrient dense. It's really important to get the right kinds of fats to feel your best. Now, mistake number 9 I see is relying too much on packaged keto foods. Now, we all want convenience. We all want speed, but relying too much on these kinds of foods is not going to be good for you in the long term, because a lot of these foods have hidden carbs in them, hidden sugars. They are really not ideal because they're not single ingredient foods, and that's really what we want to prioritize. And lastly, relying on exogenous ketones. Now, ketones actually have a caloric value. They provide energy for us in the body. And if we rely too much on exogenous ketones, we're not going to be able to burn and access our own stored body fat. So if you're testing ketones, you might take some exogenous ketones and then test your blood and you're like, wow, I have these really high ketones. Well, it's actually reading the ketones that you just either drank or ate. And it's not reading the ones that you want, which are from breakdown of your own body fat. It is the top 10 mistakes that I see people make most often on keto. And I would love to hear your feedback. And if you're interested in trying out any of my programs, go to ketogenicgirl.com and check out the 28-day challenge. It comes with my coaching and support as well. And I would love to guide you on your health journey with keto. All right, guys, that was part 1 of today's episode. Now we're going to switch over to part 2, which is my interview with the founders of the Low Carb Universe, Hanna and Bitte. They are low carb experts. They've been at it for over 10 years, and we always have such a blast when we get together and hang out. So I know you guys are going to enjoy part 2 of today's episode. Welcome, Hanna. Welcome, Bitte. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh,
thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I love getting to chat with you both. You're both so much fun.
On and off.
Yes.
Well, the theme of today's episode is keto mistakes. And I started off the episode talking about the top 10 mistakes that I see happening over and over again. And I would love to hear from both of you, you know, having been in the low carb space for a really long time, you know, you've both been doing this for a while, and I'm sure you've seen every mistake, you've made every mistake there is, you know, but maybe you could share a couple that were some of the bigger ones, you know, maybe in the last year that you've noticed and kind of tweaked, you know, something that might be helpful for someone else out there.
Yeah, I got one. The biggest mistake, as I believe, is to do as someone else does.
Oh, that's good.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because people, they want to get into this really quick and fast, and they look at, oh, that this and that one is doing like that, eating that much protein, that many carbs, and doing this and that, and they try to adapt that to themselves. And no,
I think other people, you can definitely take a start model from other people, just so they have something to start from. But then, yes, very quickly you'll have to really find out what works for you and not for anyone else. True.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's such a good one, really, because we all say it all the time. And we talk about bioindividuality and how different we are. And yet, as humans, we have this lemming component where we just can't help but want to do what other people are doing, especially when everyone is doing something. We're like, what are they doing? I need to do it. I need to do the same thing. What are you doing? What are you eating? How much are you eating? It's so
true.
funny. And you see it so much in our community, especially because we have this kind of window onto other people's lives and worlds, sharing what they're eating that day and how they're exercising and all this stuff. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to take another one, Hanna?
Yes, of course. Just a personal mistake that I realized that I did for way too long was I was relying on too much fat instead of protein for my personal goals and my personal thresholds and all of this stuff, and the bioindividuality, as you mentioned, and stuff. And I did do this for a very long time, actually, because that's the way it was supposed to be. And I was, of course, following everyone else, just as you said, Bitte. But for me, it was just too much for too long. And after my body got fat adapted properly, I should have just cut down straight away instead of waiting for some other miracle to occur for me to do that.
Amen. I totally agree on that one. Same for me.
That was the number one mistake that I shared on the episode. It was number one the first one that I shared, and I kind of worded it a little bit differently, but I basically said treating fat as a free food.
Yes.
Because, when you first start to understand the endocrine theory of weight loss and hormone signaling, and you hear that fat is the least insulin stimulating, and, you're on this healthy high fat diet, and, low carb high fat, or it really is low carb healthy fat. And yet we hear all this stuff. And so you're like, well, I can have all this, fat and it won't raise my insulin. And yet it's so energy dense. 9 calories per gram. We know that. And, it's really, we talked about this before on another podcast about how important it is to really combine the two, and energy still being a factor. Like you said, where do they go? Like the carbs or whatever we were talking about, the carbs, like where do they go? Where do the calories go? Like they still exist. So I think that's such a good point.
No, that's very true. And that whole insulin theory was, of course, my basis of knowledge as well, because I had, of course, the whole time heard when I started low carb and started researching all that stuff. So that was about 8 years ago, I think. And then, of course, I did come across that as a type 1 diabetic, as I am, you will have to use more insulin if you eat protein than if you eat fat. And that was why I kept going for so long, I think. And then, I got into a groove. It felt great, but, I wasn't maybe eating to my full potential. And when I started switching, a little bit, less fat, not like low fat by any means, but just less fat and more protein instead, my blood sugars and insulin requirements got even better than they were with that huge amount of fat. So I am actually very happy that I took that step.
That's really, really cool. And I would love to know if you kind of experience the same thing, but then, I think you have such an interesting story, and I would love to dive into it a little bit. I was listening to the podcast that you guys did where you talked about your 10-year anniversary of doing low carb. And, I think it's so cool, to celebrate that. I've been doing keto for about 5 years, and I just think it's amazing that, you were in the space for this long and consistently. And also what I loved, what you were talking about, how Sweden has been so ahead of all the other countries in Europe, especially. And you pinpointed it to being the internet. And I thought that was so insightful, because I was actually chatting with some of the ladies at the last conference about Sweden. And I said, why is Sweden so ahead of everyone else in Europe? And they said, well, a lot of it is, Dr. Andreas, with Diet Doctor, but I never thought about this whole facet about the government supporting and promoting the internet for its population. That's just fascinating.
Yes, that is so super awesome and cool. And I remember when they started this, it was in the late 90s or even earlier, I think, around the late 90s. And they gave us discounts to go and buy a computer, because the goal has always been that every Swede should have possibility to be connected and have some sort of computer or something, maybe at a library or something, so they could connect. And this is thanks to this, the knowledge about low carb spread in Sweden, because it started with very engaged people, that they started a forum that was very, very big, and then it spread. And Andreas Enfeldt started, and Dr. Annika Dahlqvist started blogging, and then it's just exploded. And everyone was so keen on sharing all the knowledge they had, so that people can, because there wasn't anything in print, there were no books like to go and buy, or like that. So I think thanks to that, and to Dr. Enfeldt and Dr. Dahlqvist, I think that we really nailed it here in Sweden, how to spread awareness about this way of eating.
I think it's so cool, because I know when I first started, and I was talking in the video today about how, there weren't all these books and videos and resources and things. And I was on these obscure forums on Reddit, and I was going on Instagram, and I remember looking at the hashtag keto, and it was just in the thousands. And then I was finding all these people in Sweden. Like, there's people that I've followed, like there's this one girl, Anna's Low Carb High Fat. I followed her, for the last 5 years. And, she just posted every day her meals. And I had all these people in Sweden, and there was Low Carb High Fat magazine. And I never saw anything like it anywhere else. And I think it's so amazing that you made that connection with the internet, and how that sharing of information really is part of the reason why it's been so big there. I'm curious for you, Hanna, what brought you to low carb, and how did you first find it?
That was actually not thanks to Sweden at all. Had I known about it when I lived in Sweden, I would probably have been a lot healthier, a lot quicker. But how I found out was actually, this was when I was becoming a nutrition coach, and I was we had a lecture, and we were talking about insulin and carbs and how it works in the body and everything. And my beautiful teacher pointed me out, and he's like, "Hanna, you don't even make insulin. Please think twice. Or if I were you, I would think twice what I put in my mouth." I'm like,
that's amazing.
Wow. That's so yeah, this very long story, very short. This guy really saved my life, because he was very much into, or is still into, clean eating and paleo and all of that stuff. And then I've just taken it a few steps further and going into keto and all that stuff. But he really opened my eyes that it was possible to have normal blood sugars as a type 1 diabetic. And that's how I also found Dr. What's his name?
Bernstein.
Yeah, Dr. Bernstein's, Dr. Richard Bernstein's book, Diabetes Solution. And that's how I got going with really starting to help manage my type 1 with low carb, and of course insulin and all the other lifestyle factors, but really low carb helped me a lot.
Now, were you afraid of things like ketoacidosis and people saying it's dangerous? And, what made you kind of brave enough to look into it and try it, and, be bold enough to try it despite all of those concerns?
Sheer desperation. That's what made me start. Actually, I'm like, well, nothing else that I tried works, so why not give this a go?
The word that I used at the KetoCon panel.
Yeah.
When someone,
I remember.
Someone said, like, asked a similar question, and I was like, desperation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because everything I had tried thus far at that point of time, it just created more blood sugar roller coasters, more insulin, more terribleness, more pain, more suffering, more, of course, all the sort of illnesses that come with badly controlled diabetes were, of course, knocking on the door. And I'm like, well, I have no choice. I have to try this. I have to. And, but yes, of course, I'm still to this day, I'm wary about ketoacidosis and all of that kind of stuff that can happen. It can happen, but chances are much less on a keto diet because you're not going to be in that acute sort of lacking insulin state as you will be on a high carb diet.
Mm-hmm.
So when, say, a type 1 diabetic, is looking into this stuff and comes to you, what are some of the steps you usually tell them in terms of, just starting to familiarize themselves with this and understanding ketoacidosis as a risk for diabetics with keto, and especially type 1, I guess?
Well, I always tell them 3 things. There's not a problem in the world as long as you, A, take the insulin that your body requires and that you can see on your blood sugars, which leads me on to B, keep an eagle eye on your blood sugar levels, and C, keep hydrated. And then you won't have a problem. If you are the kind of, I just saw someone on Instagram and who had gotten ketoacidosis, even though they're on keto and everything, and everyone's like, oh my God, we told you this was going to happen and stuff. And I'm like, well, you unplugged your insulin pump. You didn't give your body that insulin that it needs, even in the background. So of course, that becomes a lack of insulin in the body. And then, yes, ketoacidosis is a threat, of course, but it is for any diabetic. It's not more or less because you're eating less carbohydrates.
Right. That's really interesting. So you just have to be extremely vigilant about it and really...
As you should anyway.
Right. It's kind of goes with the, I guess the condition in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, switching over to you, Bitte, if you could tell us a little bit of background. Now, I know you initially came to keto and low carb because of gastritis. Could you explain what that is and how low carb helped you with that?
It's like when you have so much, it feels like you're having a lot of acid in your tummy. And you get like cramps, and you get, I also have reflux. So I could get acid up my throat. And I was trying to eat after following the glycemic index that was very popular in Sweden before low carb came up. And I did that and I felt great, but it just got more and more attacks of this gastritis. And when I got it, I got such a bad stomach ache that I would just be lying in my bed and couldn't do anything. So I just Googled for a good diet at gastritis, when having gastritis. And I ended up at this Dr. Dahlqvist. And so I read a lot because I was so afraid of the fat. So I read a lot. And after a year, I went cold turkey, just changed overnight. After 3 days, my tummy was like the best tummy you could ever have. It was calm and it was tiny, no arguing there and it loved everything I had to eat. And then I also had a lot of other advantages because I had been a big snorer. I've been snoring for quite a few years and having to take nasal sprays with cortisone. What do you call it?
Cortisone, yeah.
Yeah, and to not make my husband want to divorce me. But after a while, actually, it disappeared because I had a lot of small, low inflammation in my body. And when eating nice food, proper food, and don't eating all that crappy food, you give the body a chance to heal. And I also got rid of a lot of migraines. I had 2-3 migraine attacks every month. Not very severe, but it's disturbing. And now I might have 2 each year. Sorry, because I've been stressing and then I can relax. So it has nothing to do with the biology in that way, with the food. Because eating Chinese food was out of the question for me when I was having all those migraines. Because that triggered trigger my headaches. And I also, in the first 3 months, I lost almost 10 kilos, and I didn't train. I didn't do anything. So my body was just, it was in like nirvana. It was paradise, all that food. So, but after 3 months, I got this, I had felt it earlier, but after like 3 months, I felt like an urge to go out and running, and I've never been a runner. I hated it all my life. But I started, I tried, I started to going on, power walks, and I tried to run a little, and that I did for like 5 years, and I never succeeded with starting running. But I've always been doing, now my body wants to do in periods. It tells me, now we gotta do something. I need to move. So then I might do yoga every day for like 30 minutes during a 3-month period. And then I do nothing for like 4 months. And it sounds stupid, but I've accepted that I am this way, and I feel great. So, yeah.
I think that's actually quite normal. Like over the holidays, was doing yoga every single day.
Yeah.
And I'll get into those patterns and habits where I'll do it for a few months and then not so much. I think that's
but actually, Vanessa, I think that because when it comes to food, I tell people that you asked us one mistake people make. It's that like they eat even though they aren't hungry because they think they have to eat. And also you get that bad conscious over not moving every day, moving your body, and training and whatever it is. But if you try to, when I accepted that this is how I am, this is my personality, I'm very intense in periods, and that it was like, why should I try to change myself? Because it started with the food. I've always been trying to have listen to my body. What do my body want? Is it hungry? No. Okay, then I don't eat. Even if the rest of the family is having dinner. Do you want to move? Yes, I want to move. Okay, let's go out and move. And do some walking or training or strength training or anything. So I think, but I've been doing this for 10 years.
I totally get that. I totally get that. And I always say and think like the body is designed for pleasure and enjoyment of movement and for the enjoyment of action. And its action is there to feel good when the energy is lined up with it. There's nothing more blissful when that energy is lined up and flowing through you. And it's like, I want to play tennis this weekend, and you go and follow that instinct and that urge. And there's nothing more enjoyable than that. And there's nothing less enjoyable than forcing yourself to go for a run or a hike or something when it's the last thing you want to do and that energy isn't lined up. So the body should be there. The action should be there to enjoy life, to enjoy taking action. And it should never be this like punishment or this forced thing.
No,
definitely not, especially when it's, snowing sideways as it was. I'm like, nope, not going out.
No, thank you.
No, but then I had snow shoveling. That is actually a good way to move. And you don't even think about that you're training.
It's so funny. We were just in Colorado and my husband was shoveling snow quite a bit at our in-laws. And there was one day where he was out there shoveling at least for an hour or two. Then his dad and him went over to his sister's place and shoveled there. And they got home. And I have never seen two more ravenous people. Mom and I could not make enough food for them. And then after dinner, Pete's stomach was growling. Like we could all hear it. And, it's an amazing workout.
Yeah. It is, and fresh air.
Yes. Yeah. Not that I want to do that, but it definitely is a great workout if you're into that.
It is. Yeah, but if you live in a house where you have where you have to do it, you do it. There's no thinking about it.
I love
it.
I love it. You do that. I mean, I love watching Pete do it while I'm sipping my coffee inside indoors. Yeah, I was gonna say. I'm like, go, babe. You've got this. Look,
it's your birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I would love to know, in the last 10 years, how you've evolved things, because I know that you dabble quite a bit with carnivore, and you and I have talked about that a few times. And, where are you at with that these days, and sort of your protein intake and those kinds
I started with low carb, high fat, the traditional thing. And for many years, I thought that was the only thing. That was the right thing to do. But that what I once again come back to, you have to adapt to yourself, because it was working just like for Hanna. It worked for her the way she was doing. Then she found this protein and she changed the thing with the fat and the protein, and she made an even more improvement. And I still learn, and I have gotten less, what you call it, like when you're newly, like
militant?
when you find, yes, exactly. You're quite militant in the beginning, and maybe you need to be to really learn and get into it.
I think
but then but then you need to relax and start listening to your body. Like now, I mean, if in a period where I don't move, especially, I'm just sitting working. Then I don't need a whole lot of food. I eat less, and I'm not hungry, and I'm not thinking about it. And as you said, Vanessa, I started with the carnivore last summer in end of July, and I was very strict for like 8 weeks, and I lost 5 kilos. I didn't even know I had any more overweight to lose, and because I was quite satisfied with how I was. But then after 2 months, I felt like, okay, my body wanted to have an avocado. So I had an avocado, and then I had meat for 3 days, and then my body said, asparagus, please. So I ate asparagus. So you could say I'm 95% carnivore still, and I don't add a lot of fat. I might do it once or twice a week when I eat something, and I found a delicious butter here in Mallorca. So it's like candy. So I take a big knob of that and put it on my meat. But otherwise, I don't add anything. Sometimes I eat twice a day. Sometimes I eat breakfast because I'm hungry. And other days I just eat lunch. So, and drink my coffee. I will never quit coffee.
Interesting. You should say that.
Yeah, a lot of carnivore people do just like the meat and water thing.
Yeah.
I went off of coffee for the last 30 days because I was curious if I would see a difference. And I was really disappointed because I didn't see a single difference.
Disappointed. I would be happy.
I know. I was hoping like I would suddenly like develop the ability to fly or something, and it never came. Like
no,
I was,
need coffee for that.
I was waiting for Godot. Like nothing was happening at any point. And I think I had a couple days where my blood sugar was 10 points lower, and I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is it. It's happening." And then it was just back to the same. So I was like, "Well, my mornings are just really dull without coffee." And I had the most delicious cup I think I've maybe ever had yesterday. It was pretty darn good.
I love my coffee. So no, and that depends on it. And some people are so strict and they love it. And yes, do it. If you love it, do it. Be strict and do anything and everything. But I want to be quite relaxed to food. So I remember those when I start looking at, I should have this and I should have that and I should just have these many grams. I fly back to my Weight Watcher period, and then my mind get it stresses me.
I think it can be quite interesting to track every once in a while, and especially if I change something, then I definitely track for about what I eat, what I do, what I drink, medications, insulin, blood sugars, everything, just so I know, okay, this is doing this, and okay, in comparison to what I was doing, this is doing this. But it's nothing that I do every day, even though I maybe should. Especially to show to my endocrinologist that I'm not dying from the ketogenic diet. But apart from that, no, I don't really track either, because it also brings back terrible memories for me, because that was what you had to do in the 80s when you, that there's a headline for you. I was put on my first diet at the age of 2.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And that's how we had to keep track of what I was eating and all this stuff, and for my parents to know how many grams of this and that and whatever crap that they told them to feed me. But Yeah, no, that sort of all comes back if I track for too long. So sort of like a long weekend up to a week, I can do it. But after that, I'm like, no, we're done. We're done here. Thanks.
I can do some tracking as well. I did when I started carnivore. I measured everything I ate and I checked my ketones, I checked my blood sugar, but I did it just for 2 weeks, just to get a grip of
Exactly.
what I was doing. Nothing else. So, yeah.
I think one of the most beautiful things, what I see with a lot of people who have been doing low carb for a while, is this gradual movement towards intuitive eating. And
Yes,
I think that is one of the coolest things, because we somehow have lost the ability to eat for ourselves, like to know what to just eat. And we're so disconnected from our bodies. And I really wanted to point out something that I heard you say too on that podcast when you were talking about your 10 years. And you said something that really stood out to me. And it was, I thought that all of this was crazy. And there was yet something that stuck in my brain.
Yeah.
And it was logic. Like I had the same experience where I definitely thought everything that I'm living now is the complete opposite of everything I always did my entire life that never worked. And yet it was the logic that why is it that everything else we're doing is so illogical? Like, are we so easily manipulated by the media or by whoever it is, food guidelines and special interests, that we can be told all these things and we trust everything that we're told, and yet it defies logic. Things like eat more times a day and your metabolism will be faster and you'll burn more fat the more you eat.
that was cute.
Yeah, we can take something like that and go, yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't, and it's the logic to me about low carb that appeals so much. And yet I love how you said it's stuck in your brain, and it's almost like just because we are, at the end of the day, we're logical creatures, and in logic, I love logic. We all do. It made sense, and something in you knew, like, this makes sense, even though it's crazy. And why do we think it's crazy? Because it just defies everything that we've been told.
Yeah, probably.
And I've been fooled many years. So
same here.
That's why, as a low carber, people come up to me and tell me, where's the science behind this? And then I ask them, where's the science? Did you read any studies or scientific reports about the way you are eating? Or have you been just listening to the authorities?
Yeah.
Where's the science behind junk food? That's what I want to know.
Yes, exactly.
That's the most ironic thing, is when people say, oh, there's no long-term studies done on the safety.
Apart from the past couple of million years.
I'm like, just a few million years. Oh, and what about, long-term safety of eating
evolution,
high carb, low fat? We're seeing the results of this crazy experiment, and people are fed up, and they just don't want to be losing all their family members to various, chronic non-infectious diseases that could have potentially been prevented through, eating properly, eating real food. And I love that people are fed up, and that we're seeing this consciousness, this growing awareness of carbs, of all these things. Now, Hanna, have you changed at all? I know we were talking a little bit about how you kind of initially, you embraced the fat, which is great because you get those fat burning enzymes going in your body. All those lipases that are needed. You develop more bile to emulsify the fats. There's so many reasons why it's so important to eat fat at the beginning to make that transfer into fat burning mode. But I know you mentioned kind of that you've been eating more protein as well, and kind of wondering how you've evolved your approach to low carb over the years.
Awesome. Well, it started way before I started low carb, high fat. It started when my teacher told me that. I, of course, started reading more on the paleo kind of stuff. So I started on a very liberal paleo, and I started, first I took away all the gluten, because gluten autoimmunity, as type 1 is, doesn't mix very well. And also my dad has celiac disease. So I'm like, well, in case it's hereditary, let's not go there. So I took away gluten, and then step by step, grains, fruits, all of this sweet stuff, sugar, of course, was kind of out anyway, and all this stuff first. And then I slowly started going into the sort of higher fat concept of the whole diet thing. And then I'm like, well, wait, this is probably not going to be very sustainable because I will be gaining weight because I can see it already. And then I started, so that's sort of my last 8 years in terms of eating, very fast summarized. So I went from liberal paleo to today higher protein keto because it just works the best for me at this point of time. That's of course not to say that it will be the rest of my life, but for right now it works very well and I'm very happy.
That's great. I'm so glad, that you found something that works for you. And it's so cool once you get the hang of doing low carb, just to tweak things here and there.
Yeah.
And you see kind of results and you see a difference. And I love that everyone kind of in the low carb space gets there because they're willing to self-experiment. And maybe that comes from desperation, that it really takes desperation in order to get to the point where you're like, well, this is crazy, but what if I got to lose? Like,
Exactly.
If I've been doing everything one way and nothing's ever worked, why don't I just try the exact opposite of everything I've always done? And I love that, you guys are both thriving so much. And we're going to be talking about all of this stuff and more at Keto Ladies coming up next month. I'm literally counting down the weeks and I really can't wait to be there. Can you share some highlights with us, some things that, we're, looking forward to there?
Do you want to go ahead, Bitte?
Oh, yes. It's this girl, Vanessa.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
To talk about a new best friend forever.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that will be very interesting. And we also have Jimena de la Serna, this very... I can't find the right word in English, but she's like so super awesome. She's Spanish and living in England. And she was at the Keto Ladies last year as well. And now I've forgotten totally what she's going to talk about.
She's going to talk about the best for PCOS
yes,
and beyond.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. And you continue.
We have tons of very, very interesting and phenomenal speakers. Bitte Jonsson, of course, also addiction specialist, talking about sugar addiction, and Romina Skalko, a new one who we've scooped up from the German-speaking low-carb world. And she's going to talk about a lot about the mind-body connection and what being slim has to do with happiness. And of course, then we also have Elena Gross, who is talking about migraines, and she's a neuroscientist. So that's very interesting to hear what she has to say. And Patricia Daly, of course, with cancer. Not sure quite on what perspective, but I'm sure we'll get there.
But she has some news. She says, I've got some really exciting stuff to tell you. So that is going to be really exciting. And then we have Dr. Angharad Powell from Wales. She's going to talk about insulin resistance on female puberty, fertility, and breastfeeding.
Yeah,
and
that's going to be super expensive. Not expensive, but
exciting. This Angharad we saw in a BBC documentary about sugar and stuff. And she just was in that documentary for like 3 minutes. And I was like blown away because she had the best energy ever. And she sounded so sane, for being a doctor also.
Speaking of a doctor, we also have another doctor, but she's our bonus speaker. Yeah. So I pre-recorded an interview with Dr. Anna Kabeka, who's going to talk about menopause and what we can do to alleviate menopause with lifestyle and food. Yeah. So that's going to be super exciting as well.
Yeah.
And a lot more, of course.
Yes. And all the workshops.
Joy and movement and 100% low carb food. And we can't just shut up about it. So you'll have to shut us up, Vanessa.
Yeah.
I'm just excited for the food. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, that food.
So are we.
I'm ready to hit that buffet, to hit that low carb buffet pretty hard.
Yeah, and the remarkable thing, the wonderful thing about the buffet is that, we call ourselves the Low Carb Universe. And the universe is because there are so many low carb stars. in the sky, and everyone has their different kind and model of eating. But anyone who has been with us and eating our food during our events, they say it's like it was made for me.
Yeah.
That's so cute. Yeah,
That's
so true.
That's the best review a hotel restaurant can get.
I lost 3 pounds after Low Carb Universe in November, and it was one of the first times that I went on holiday.
Cryotherapy.
I went on holiday. I hit the buffet hard twice a day, and I came back 3 pounds lighter, which was pretty sweet. But it's just amazing food, amazing spa. I discovered the spa last time.
Yeah.
Fully. I mean, I made use of it with the hot tub and I got a massage while I was there too.
Oh.
I really needed from all the studying I was doing, which is what I told myself. And just being there is amazing. I mean, you're on an island in Spain, surrounded by incredible women, making new friends, eating amazing food, swimming in the pool.
Yeah.
It's just
the ocean.
It's spectacular. It really is. I love what you guys do, and I'm so excited for it, and I can't wait to meet everyone who's going to be there with us this year. So thank you guys for all the hard work you put into these events. I really appreciate
it. Thank you, Vanessa.
And your kind words.
Yeah, yeah. We can't wait to meet you again.
Yeah, big talking about my new BFF, as you mentioned, glucagon, which is the fat-burning hormone, and I can't wait to chat more about that and geek out with you guys.
Anytime, darling.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. So thanks so much for joining us and being here with us today, sharing so many great insights about keto mistakes, and looking forward to having you guys back on in a future episode. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It was a true pleasure as always, Vanessa.
Yes.
Awesome. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risks or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown. So you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian.